thing we have to fear is
in war,
fear itself.
there is no substitute for victory.
Let us never negotiate out of fear.
We stand undivided, forever united, fighting hand in hand for the liberty we've earned, for glory and honor, for our sons and daughters, ever mindful of the lessons we've learned. Let the torch of freedom burn.
Welcome to the intersection of faith and politics. WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green. Our website, wallbuilderslive.com. Lots of things you can do there at that website. One of them, actually, well, you don't have to go to the website to do this, but our email address. If you'd like us to cover certain topics that we haven't covered yet, or maybe we've talked a little bit about and you'd like to know more, or you just have a question about something regarding the Founding Fathers or an issue in our culture today, you can email that to us at radio@wallbuilders.com. Also at the website, you can check out our archives, and if you're tuning in today and missed yesterday or the day before, you're going to want to go to those archives because this is the third part in a three-part series. Today we're going to get the conclusion of a presentation by David Barton called The Principles of Limited Government. So yesterday and the day before are available on our website if you want to get caught up. Go to wallbuilderslive.com, click on the archive section, download the last 2 days. And by the way, you'll see in that archive section you can actually get programs from as far back as a year ago. Everything from senators and congressmen about what's going on Capitol Hill, to state legislators across the country and legislation that's either passed and been a good thing or some bad things that have happened and why we need to stop it, to the attorneys that are arguing before the Supreme Court and fighting battles to defend Christians who have been arrested for sharing the gospel and all kinds of other things. So all of those programs are available on our website at wallbuilderslive.com. Our other website is wallbuilders.com, where you can also go to get all kinds of great information. And one of the things you can get there is the CD of this presentation, Principles of Limited Government. But you can also get it on the website at wallbuilderslive.com if you want to listen to it in the parts. So without any further ado, we're going to pick up right where we left off yesterday with David in the middle of the Principles of Limited Government.
Jefferson said you need to be frugal in government, and 1 is with power, 2 is with spending, and 3 is with growth. Again, Benjamin Franklin, who had so many good statements, this is a statement he said: government is aptly compared to architecture. If the superstructure is too heavy for the foundation, the building totters, even if assisted by outward props. In other words, if you outbuild the foundation, the whole structure's in jeopardy. If you build a foundation for a building that's 10 feet by 10 feet, and the building above that you build on top of that foundation is 1,000 feet by 1,000 feet, the foundation is not going to hold it. And that's the problem, is we have a foundation that was built for a limited government. And we keep outgrowing our foundation and getting into things that were never authorized, taking power that God never allowed government to have. And so we see the thing is, it's not frugality of growth. Sam Adams has a very insightful statement. He said, if the liberties of America are ever completely ruined, it will be because of a mistaken notion of prudence that leads men to give in to measures of the most destructive tendency for the sake of present ease. In other words, well, that's probably not the best principle, but it's something I really want now. So since I want it right now for present ease, I'm going to go ahead and give into that measure that government probably shouldn't even be involved with. And as he said, that's a destructive tendency, and we give into measures that will destroy good government for the sake of present ease. And that's why if you look at the federal government, there are 19 cabinet-level departments. Now, you look at the cabinet-level departments, for the sake of present ease, we said, well, let's create a Department of Education. Now, we've always had education be local, and it's always been dealt with at the local level, and that way parents are the most involved, and they have the most input over what happens with their kids. But no, let's federalize it. Let's play like one size fits all, and the kids that are raised in San Antonio need exactly what kids in New York City need, which is exactly what kids in Omaha, Nebraska, and that's not the way it works. But we, for the sake of present ease, said, well, we'll let the federal government do education. And by the way, Let's let the federal government take care of the environment. Let's not be good stewards ourselves. Let's let the government do that. Oh, and let's let the federal government have a Department of Agriculture, and they can oversee all the agricultural things. Now, we understand that agriculture is privately owned, but the government needs to tell private individuals what to do with agriculture. And the Department of Housing, and we've given up so many departments. And in giving up those departments, President Dwight D. Eisenhower said this: the people that values its privileges above its principles soon loses both. And we gave up principles for the sake of present ease, as Sam Adams says. And when you give up your principles for ease, you give your principles for something that you want right now, you lose both your principles and your values. So the second thing is to exercise frugality.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. The teachings of God's Word are the best friend civil government has because these teachings deal with the heart. Only by dealing with the heart can crime be prevented, for as Jesus explained in Matthew 5, all crime comes from the heart. Understanding this, Daniel Webster, the great defender of the Constitution, once declared, "The cultivation of the religious sentiment represses licentiousness. It inspires respect for law and order and gives strength to the whole social fabric. Whatever makes men good Christians makes them good citizens." Indeed, it is not the good Christians whom the police arrest for armed robbery, gang activity, or other such crimes. Understanding this, the Founding Fathers encouraged religious instruction, for as Daniel Webster so accurately noted, good Christians make good citizens.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
The third principle of good government set forth by Jefferson in his first inaugural address, he said government is to restrain the infliction of injury. Now, to understand this, we need go no further than a simple passage out of the Bible. Just reading from 1 Timothy 1, verses 8 through 10, this is what God tells us in the Scriptures. He says, "We know that the law is good if it's used as it should be used." So law is a good deal if you use it properly. What's the proper way to use the law? God continues. He says, "It must be remembered, of course, that laws are made not for good people, but for lawbreakers and criminals, for murderers, for the immoral, for sexual perverts, for prostitutes, for homosexuals, for slave traders, for kidnappers, for perjurers, or for those who do anything else contrary to sound policy." In other words, we make laws to restrain the bad, not the good. We restrain in all that list of behavior that was listed to be restrained there by the Scripture. That's why law exists. Now, Romans 13:3 says, as a result, rulers are a terror not to good works, but to evil. In other words, if government's doing what it's doing to restrain injury, doing what it's supposed to do, then it's the bad people who have a fear of government, not the good people. But we really don't find ourselves in that situation today. I'll go back to something President Reagan said, and it was just a nice little quip that he made, and it was humorous because it's based in truth. He said the 9 most terrifying words in the English language are, "Hi, I'm from the government and I'm here to help." Now, we don't look at the government as being a blessing in that sense. We say, "Oh no, it's the government. This is a bad deal." And particularly, you look at just a single agency like the Internal Revenue Service. Does that scare the good people or the bad people? It doesn't scare the bad people. It scares the good people. That's not the purpose of government. And by the way, the IRS is just one agency in 19 cabinet-level departments. There are hundreds and hundreds of agencies. And they're not there to restrict the wicked and the evil. They're not the terror to evil. They become a terror to the good people. And if you look at the IRS code, now actually the statute on the IRS is not that long, but it's administrative law where they go in and reinterpret the statute. The IRS code right now is 3,400,000 words long. That's the IRS code under which all citizens live. Now, 3.4 million words, let me put that in perspective. The Bible itself is only 783,000 words long. So in other words, the IRS code is 5 times longer than the Bible. God was able to govern the whole world for 5,000 years with the Bible, and the IRS in one agency has a code book 5 times longer than the Bible and has difficulty governing. That's because it's not the purpose of law. They've gotten out of what law is supposed to do. If you look at the U.S. Federal Code, and the U.S. Federal Code is in every county courthouse, every county law library will have a copy of the U.S. Federal Code. If you look at the U.S. Federal Code annotated and take that, and by the way, those are all the federal laws under which we all live, and we know that ignorance of the law is no excuse. And so if I happen to be going down a highway at 70 miles an hour and a policeman stops me and he says, well, the speed limit was 50, oh man, I thought it was 70. Well, the fact I was ignorant of the law is not an excuse. I'm still going to get a ticket. I'm still going to get in trouble. So therefore, you need to know the laws under which you live. If you will decide, therefore, to go and read the U.S. Federal Code, and these are the laws under which you live, the laws for which you're responsible, if you'll take the U.S. Federal Code and read the U.S. Federal Code, and if you'll agree to read 700 pages a week in the U.S. Federal Code, you can finish the U.S. Federal Code in only 25,000 years. What? If I read 700 pages a week, it's going to take me 25,000 years. Yeah, when you look back to the founding era in 1789, do you know how many federal felonies we had? 3. You know how many federal felonies there are today? 4,500 federal felonies. It's not that there's that many crimes, it's that we've made everything into a felony. And again, it used to be local police who said, no, we're not going to have that, and the state police. No, we've made everything into the federal. So whether it be in crime and felonies and turning everything into a crime, or the length of the federal code, or the length of even agency regulations, it's not limited government anymore. It's not doing the third part, and government exists to restrain the infliction of injury. That's why government exists.
This is David Barton with another moment from America's history. As another year's elections draw near, again have surfaced those who argue that a candidate's private life does not matter. Founding Father John Witherspoon, a signer of the Declaration of Independence, would strongly object to this. He exhorted, "Choose leaders of inward principle and exemplary lifestyle." Is it reasonable to expect wisdom from the ignorant, or faithfulness from the unfaithful, or diligence from men of careless life? Is it reasonable to commit public money to those who have wasted their own? Those, therefore, who pay no regard to religion and sobriety in the persons who they send to the legislature of any state are guilty of the greatest absurdity and will soon pay dear for their folly. John Witherspoon knew that private life did matter. Let this be a principal consideration as we vote for any candidate in the upcoming elections.
For more information on God's hand in American history, contact WallBuilders at 1-800-8-REBUILD.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
If you look at the fourth purpose of government, Jefferson said it was to encourage entrepreneurship and free enterprise. As you look back at his quote, and he says that is to encourage industry and encourage business. And so you say, okay, so we're to encourage entrepreneurship and free enterprise. Now, there's some really good quotes on this. Matter of fact, Jefferson himself said this: "The pillars of our prosperity are the most thriving when left most free to individual enterprise." If you want the nation to prosper, then you let the people run the businesses. You let the people do the work. It's interesting that in the crashes that we've had in the recent decades, those who needed bailouts and those who needed economic help from the government were the most regulated industries. It was the insurance industries. It was the health industries. It was where the unions were. It was where you had the most regulation, you had the least amount of prosperity. And that's why Jefferson said the pillars of our prosperity are the most thriving when left most free to individual enterprise. That's entrepreneurship. Benjamin Franklin said it this way. He said, "A free market is the means under God of establishing the freedom of our country entire and of handing it down complete to posterity." free market system is what will hand the prosperity off to the next generation. You get out of that, you'll lose your prosperity, you'll have all the economic calamities and pressures that come. So we understood that the purpose of government was to encourage entrepreneurship and free enterprise, not to encourage the regulation of individuals and businesses and what and how they could do. Those are the areas that get into the most difficulty and have the most need of bailouts. It's free enterprise that is the most prosperous and thriving unless government inhibits that. And then finally, the fifth thing that Jefferson talked about was to protect the property and earnings of citizens. He said not to take from their mouth the bread of labor that's earned. So protect their property, protect their earnings. And that's really two thoughts. I mean, protecting property is one clear thought, and this goes back to inalienable rights, the Fifth Amendment, the right to pursue happiness, which is the right to acquire, own, possess, and use your own property. James Madison, who today they call the father of the Constitution, he said this. He said, "It's not a just government, nor is property secure under it, where the property which a man has in his personal safety and personal liberty is violated by arbitrary seizures of one class of citizens for the service of the rest." In other words, he says it's not a good government and property is not safe if the government can come in and take your private property and give it to someone else. Now, that's what we've seen in recent years. It started back with the Kelo decision, but they're saying, you know, the city needs your property and it can make greater tax income if it takes your house and turns it into a shopping mall. And so what we've seen a rise of is this kind of use of eminent domain. It's not a good deal. And by the way, nonprofits and churches are the real target of that because they don't pay any taxes. So we need to knock every church down and put a strip mall up somewhere and put a shopping center. And you have towns like there's one outside of Houston, Texas that has 54 churches and wants them all out of town. Churches don't produce income. Yeah, churches produce a ton of income because they produce people that don't commit crimes. They produce people that don't do white-collar crimes. The police have so much less to do. There's so much less need for prisons. The contributions of churches is massive in what they save the government. But the government says, no, you're not producing tax income, therefore you're a burden to us, and we need you gone. 54 churches out of town. We need to take that property and give it. So it's not good government when it doesn't protect the property of citizens. John Dickinson, I mentioned him earlier, John Dickinson, signer of the Constitution, said it this way. He said, "Let these truths be indelibly impressed on our minds. Number one, we cannot be happy without being free. Number two, we cannot be free without being secure in our property. And number three, we cannot be secure in our property if, without our consent, others can take it away." See, this is part of the problem with even property taxes. You may own a piece of property that's $100,000, but if you don't pay $100 of taxes on it, the government will take it away from you. Well, then was it ever really your property if it can be taken away from you for $100 when it's valued at $100,000? That's the difficulty with property taxes, is the government saying it's really our land. We're just kind of letting you lease it every year, and you pay these taxes every year, and we'll let you stay on that land. See, that's a difficulty with government, not protecting property. So that's protecting property, and the other part of that fifth component of Jefferson was protect the earnings of citizens. He was very straightforward on this. Listen to what Thomas Jefferson said. He said, "To take from one because it's thought that his own productivity has acquired too much in order to give it to others who have not exercised equal industry and skill is to violate arbitrarily the first principle of association, which is the guarantee to everyone of a free exercise of his hard work and the profits acquired by it." In other words, he says, if someone works really, really hard and through his own productivity creates wealth and creates prosperity, then to take that away and give it to others who did not use the equal diligence and equal skill and equal hard work, he said that violates the first principle of association, which is if you work hard, you get to enjoy the profits of your hard work.
Red, White, Blue, and Green is a new reality show following the Green family around the nation, rediscovering the American principles that made us the most successful nation in the history of the world. You can be a part of launching this new reality series by visiting rickgreen.com and clicking on the Red, White, Blue, and Green tab. Here's a sneak peek from the pilot episode.
Rick Green coming to you live from the Lone Star State of Texas, a beacon of hope and freedom to liberty lovers around the world. Today I'm thinking about why do we do what we do? Because everywhere we go as a family, when we're traveling and speaking, someone comes up to us and asks, where's the hope? Is it over for America? They genuinely feel like the stars and stripes are fading. I felt that. But when I look at my family, whether it's my son Trey and his drive to exceed expectations, or Reagan and his love for serving and teaching other people, Cameron and her determination to outperform her brothers in everything she does, or my little stagehound Rhett and his boundless enthusiasm, through their eyes, I see a vibrant nation. When my children stand in the birthplace of the Constitution, or on battlefields where patriots gave their lives, I can see in them a rekindled flame of the American spirit. The future of my children's country is bright because it's built on the foundation of an incredible providential history. A history of patriots and pastors, entrepreneurs and freedom fighters, mothers, fathers, families like yours and mine, who chose to live like their nation depended on it. And it still does. So when people ask us, where is the hope? We tell them, it's in you. Each of us, every individual, every family, has a duty to fight for freedom and add our voice, our color, to the American dream. For our family, it's red, white, and blue, and a little bit of green. To learn more about red, white, blue, and green, visit rickgreen.com.
Let the torch of freedom burn.
This is part of the problem with the capital gains tax. If you go back and look in the Bible at passages like Luke 19 and Matthew 25, you recall that Jesus in that parable, he called all the servants together. In that parable, the master gets the servants and he gives them all in Luke 19 a mina. And a mina is translated as a specific amount of money. And he says, invest this till I come back. So he comes back, he says, it's reckoning time. And one guy took his mina and turned it into 5. One guy took his, turned it into 10. One guy took his mina, that economic amount, didn't do anything with it. And they still had it. And the master came back and he says, here's what you gave me. And the master says, wait a minute. Why didn't you at least make some profit by just taking the interest on it? Why couldn't you at least make the interest on it? And the guy said, look, I didn't want to do this. I didn't want to work hard. You're not a fair guy anyway. And I just didn't want to be part of this. And the master at that point, Jesus said that take the one mina from the one and give it to the guy who had 10. And the other said, wait a minute, that's not fair. He's already got 10. Listen to Jesus' response. He said, to him that has will more be given. To him that has not will be taken away even that which he has. Now what he says is, if you're unproductive, that's not the ones you reward. The ones that are productive, those are the ones you reward. The ones that by their hard work and by their investment, by other things, if they've made profit, those are the ones you want to reward, because the more profit they make, the more prosperity they create, the better government you have, the less need there is to tax, because we understood that. But now we've taken it and said, no. If you haven't worked hard and made something, or you've just had bad luck, we're going to reward you. But those that have really done something good, now we're going to have to take more from you to take care of those who didn't do very good work. And by the way, if you handled your real estate right and didn't need a bailout, we're going to have to tax you for those who didn't handle the real estate right and they do need a bailout. We're going to have to reward them. So everything is backward, and that's what Jefferson says is exactly wrong. That's not what government is to do. Ben Franklin echoed the same thing. Ben Franklin said there cannot be a stronger natural right than that of man's making the best profit he can. So those were the 5 simple elements that make good government. One is you start with acknowledging and adoring God. From there you understand that you've got rights that you're to protect, that government exists to protect those rights, that it's limited in its scope. 2 is governments to exercise frugality. Number 1, over power, and number 2, over spending, and number 3, over growth. But that's the second component. So acknowledge and adore God is 1. 2 is exercise frugality. The third is restrain the infliction of injury. Pass laws to regulate the bad, not the good guys. The purpose of law is not to regulate the good, it's to regulate the bad. The fourth is encourage entrepreneurship and free enterprise. And the fifth is protect the property and the earnings of citizens. Those are the 5 things that make us a happy and a prosperous nation. Those are the core principles of good government, or those are the core principles of limited government. So as we look for leaders to choose from all levels, as the scripture says in Exodus 18:21, choose out leaders of tens, fifties, hundreds, and thousands. We choose our local, county, state, and federal officials. These are the components. This is the philosophy of government we want to see in them. We want them to understand these 5 components, and if we elect these type of leaders to office at every level, then we will be a happy and a prosperous people, able to exercise freely the rights that God has given us, and we will remain the nation that was known as that of an exceptional nation. If we want to preserve American exceptionalism, if we want to preserve the prosperity and blessing that we've had, we have to understand these 5 basic God-given principles that create good or that create limited government. God bless.
Well, that's the conclusion. David Barton on the principles of limited government. If you happen to tune in today sort of halfway through, or maybe you heard all of today but missed yesterday and the day before, be sure to go to our website, WallBuildersLive.com, and you can listen to the first 2 parts in this 3-part series by David, or you can get the CD at our website, WallBuilders.com, also by the same title, The Principles of Limited Government. Now let's all go out there and do our part to maintain those principles, to uphold those principles, frankly, to return those principles to so many areas of our government. I'm Rick Green. I appreciate you joining us today on WallBuilders Live with David Barton and Rick Green.